The one, the only Vertigo. A dreamlike masterpiece. The Mona Lisa of cinema. Flawless. Superior to other Mir movies and without any imperfections. That's what I thought, anyway. But I found on the IMDb website a list of errors in Vertigo. People with really sharp eyes had picked up on a bunch of mistakes which had always escaped my notice. So for fun, I decided one night to re-watch Vertigo and to pay attention to these mistakes. And that's when I noticed something unsettling. There's one hidden detail in the film which no one to my knowledge has ever mentioned, and it happens during this scene. You remember this scene early in the story at the art museum where you and I are introduced to the portrait of Carlotta. Looking at the list of movie mistakes, I was told to keep an eye out for how the objects in the background change between shots. See on the right through that doorway? But as I was comparing the difference between these two shots, that's when something I never expected to see leaped out at me. Have you noticed it yet? There is not one, but two versions of the Carlotta painting in this scene. The two paintings are identical in size and composition, so it's hard to notice at first, but even at this distance I can tell their faces are different. The dress one Carlotta wears is lavender, while the other Carlotta's dress is blue. Zero in on that area behind the back of Carlotta's head and the column. In one painting, this area is murky, while in the other painting, this area is illuminated. Everything else in the two shots, aside from the background artifacts, remains the same, but for some puzzling reason, Alfred Hitchcock presents you and me with a new mystery, as if Vertigo isn't mysterious enough already. That night, rewatching Vertigo and seeing this weird new portrait, I felt like this was the first time I had actually seen the film. I had the creepy feeling that this old, familiar film I was looking at was suddenly looking at me. Welcome to part 1 of Vertigo, investigating a Hitchcock masterpiece. My name is Mark, and this project of mine is going to be a series of videos examining and analyzing the 1958 Alfred Hitchcock film. But it didn't start out that way. After I saw that strange new portrait, the only thing I wanted to do was to solve the mystery. My husband Andrew happens to have a copy of the book Vertigo, the making of a Hitchcock classic. I wanted to know if the crew went back to the museum to shoot the scene a second time. But I learned from the production notes in the book that filming at the museum location only took place within the span of 3 consecutive days in 1957, October 7th, 8th, and 9th. And by the way, I looked on the internet and learned that this was a Monday, Tuesday, and a Wednesday. I also looked on the internet to see if anyone else had noticed this strange new portrait in the film, but with no luck. No one out there seems to know about this. That's why I decided to make this video. If I'm not mistaken, from May of 1958, when Vertigo was released, to when I'm making this video now in the year 2024, this one detail in Vertigo has been lurking unnoticed in the face of every person on the planet who has ever seen this film. Okay, so I've made the video, the end. But this is just the beginning. Here's what's bothering me. Obviously, the crew came from Hollywood to San Francisco with 2 already completed prop Carlotta paintings. I learned that 3 or 4 paintings were commissioned. They're all apparently lost now. The only Carlotta painting known to still exist is this one. Another tidbit I learned, the gown Carlotta wears is actually a costume from the 1949 film The Heiress, starring Olivia de Havilland. Anyway, once we get to San Francisco that Monday, we bring a couple of paintings because maybe Alfred Hitchcock is still unsure about which portrait he likes better. Or maybe there's another reason, because here's where it gets really suspicious. When we leave San Francisco and get back to Hollywood later in production, and we're in the little room editing the reels of film, why do we include this disconcerting shot? Alfred Hitchcock and editor George Tomasini have footage that matches the rest of the scene that they can print from the negative and use, but they don't. They don't, and to me, this might mean that the mistake isn't accidental at all. The more I think about it, the more I think putting this weird portrait in the movie is a deliberate choice. And if it's deliberate, maybe the other mistakes that occur in the film happen on purpose too. These accidents begin to feel, to me, less like mistakes and more like something else. They point to the unexpected likelihood that the Vertigo I think I know is something else, another Vertigo entirely. The way I understand it, Alfred Hitchcock's precision as a filmmaker was surgical, but the mistakes in Vertigo at first glance appear uncharacteristically sloppy to me. There are, of course, the rearranged museum artifacts, but also this same sailor walks by the camera 2 times in this scene. On the headboard of Judy's hotel room bed is a frilly lampshade that appears, then disappears, and then reappears. Look at this left turn at the no left turn sign. Scotty owns a white 1956 DeSoto, license plate number HAF376, which he's driving as he passes a white 1956 DeSoto, license plate number HAF376, as if he's having an out-of-body experience. There are the chairs that seem to wander around Scotty's living room on their own, something that might happen in a dream. And in addition to these and other mistakes are the mistakes I like to call the big 3. Number 1, how long can Scotty survive his rooftop predicament before help arrives as the gutter he clings to bites into his fingertips? Number 2, Gavin Elster's overly complicated plan to stage his wife's alleged suicide succeeds way too perfectly, even though the tiniest random thing could have derailed it. Like, what if Judy, masquerading as Madeline, didn't happen to have a replica of whatever the real Mrs. Elster decided to wear that day? And number 3, at the McKittrick Hotel, a vanishing act occurs. The key to the room is still on the rack. Without the key, there's no access to the room. So how did Judy, posing as Madeline, posing as Carlotta Valdez, get inside the room? And how did her exit from the hotel evade detection? Alfred Hitchcock coined a term when asked about this scene, fridge logic, or icebox talk. His intention was for you and me to leave the movie theater, go home, raid the fridge, and for this scene to nag at us. Alfred Hitchcock's own explanation was that the innkeeper was in on the crime, but as I hope to illustrate in a minute, maybe you and I shouldn't place too much trust in someone as clever as Alfred Hitchcock. The big 3 mistakes in Vertigo defy logic. It's doubtful they could occur in the San Francisco of our shared reality, but the mistakes in the story become less problematic if they aren't happening in reality. But if the reality is, they're happening in a dream. If Vertigo is a dream, who is the dreamer? Look at it this way. The story's events are set in San Francisco, but the dream's events are set in the mind of Scotty Ferguson. See, it's all coming together, isn't it? Well, maybe not yet, but please keep watching because things are about to get freaky. A few people have gone on record saying Vertigo is actually a dream that Scotty's having. James F. Maxfield in the 1990s. Film critic Robin Wood in the 1960s. To my surprise, even the film's screenwriter Samuel Taylor goes on record admitting Vertigo is a dream. You and I, as an audience, aren't supposed to know this, but for his first draft of the screenplay in February 1957, Samuel Taylor says he co-wrote it with Ambrose Bierce. This is a joke since Ambrose Bierce died in 1914. Ambrose Bierce was famous for his 1890 short story, An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, which is a story I now know Alfred Hitchcock admired. A year after Vertigo is released, Alfred Hitchcock goes on to adapt this story for his TV show. Basically, the story has a gimmick which tricks the reader into believing that the narrative is actually happening to the characters, but at the end it is revealed that it was all just a dream. In fact, the only story Alfred Hitchcock himself wrote that's known to still exist uses this same gag. It puts a woman, probably a blonde woman, through a terrifying experience, only to have her wake up safe and sound in a dentist chair. Coincidentally, another blonde woman, Barbara Bel Geddes, who plays Midge in Vertigo, later starred on the TV show Dallas. And season 9 of Dallas is infamous for revealing in its finale that every episode of that season was actually just a dream. It's all kind of like how the Technicolor part of The Wizard of Oz represents a dream Dorothy is having, while she's actually knocked out cold the entire time in colorless Kansas. Like Dorothy's trip to Oz, Vertigo doesn't depict a physical waking journey. Vertigo depicts a psychological dream. There are two problems to overcome with stating as a fact Vertigo is a dream. For one thing, every example I just listed contains a moment in which the story confesses to the spectator that it was all a dream. But Vertigo doesn't seem to contain such a confession. And the other problem is this. If the story of Vertigo is just a dream, that means Scotty is shown in the story having a dream within the dream. And people don't usually dream they're having dreams, do they? But I'm about to show you that Vertigo actually does reveal it was all just a dream. Just like he did with that portrait, Alfred Hitchcock hides the evidence in plain sight. If you're like me, at this point you're wondering which part of Vertigo is a dream and which part is reality. What if the answer is this simple? Like The Wizard of Oz, everything in Vertigo that happens in color is a dream. You ever thought about why Vertigo begins without color? Why set the beginning apart so much from the rest of the film? Let's go back to Scotty's dream or nightmare, or whatever it truly is, and keep in mind how the beginning of the nightmare and the opening of the film parallel each other. Right off the bat, Scotty's nightmare and the opening of the film both have something in common you're probably already aware of. They both feature animation. These are the only two sequences in the film to do this, so there's our first link. Before entering Scotty's bedroom, there's this establishing shot. It's like one you and I have seen before. Remember the rooftop panorama from the action sequence that starts the film? It's virtually the same. Now, there's our second link. Now compare what Scotty does before the nightmare montage begins to what the woman in the opening credits does before the story begins. He moves his lips but doesn't talk, the same way the woman is shown doing. I don't know about you, but that lip movement has always bothered me. It's like it's there on purpose. Anyway, back to Scotty. He indicates the right side of the screen with his head, then he indicates the left, just like the woman does in the opening credits with her eyes. There is a heavy emphasis on the leftward direction in Vertigo, which I'll get into later. From the left, Scotty then looks forward at the camera, and that's when his nightmare begins to engulf him. Likewise, from the left, the woman locks eye contact with you and me, and for the first time, color begins to engulf her. Color signifies that what you and I are about to witness is a dream. Color equals dream in Vertigo. I can say that because of another clue. Right as Scotty's nightmare is ending, it loses its dream power, and changes to black and white. This is significant because for every main character's final scene in Vertigo, Alfred Hitchcock and Edith Head dress them in shades of black and white. First to go is Madeline in her gray suit. Next is Gavin Elster. Midge is actually wearing blue in her final scene, but for her final shot, she turns her back, and all you and I can see is her gray coat and her black shoes. Next is Judy. Like Midge, Judy is also wearing a color in her final scene, the red necklace. But for her final shot, all you and I can see is her black dress. And finally, Scotty, dressed in a charcoal suit and a silver necktie. Color equals dream, and every main character makes their departure from the dream virtually drained of color. And here's one more link. Both the nightmare and the story itself end with Scotty striking this same pose. The nightmare isn't a dream at all, it's a revelation. It reveals two things. I'll get to the second later, but for right now, it reveals that Vertigo was all just a dream. I'm beating you over the head with this point, but you didn't need me to do that. You've already heard people describe Vertigo as dreamlike, so it's not too much of a leap to accept that Vertigo is a dream. And dream interpretation is where the party's at in Vertigo, isn't it? Since Vertigo is just a dream, on the one hand, that comes as a relief. The kind police officer in the beginning didn't die after all. Midge was never shut out of Scotty's life, never to be heard from again. Scotty never took advantage of Judy. Gavin Elster never took advantage of Judy either. In his conspiracy to break his wife's neck, fling her off a tower, and run off with her family fortune. None of this actually happened. None of it mattered. But on the other hand, since Vertigo is just a dream and none of it matters, that means you and I just paid good money to watch it, and we got swindled by Alfred Hitchcock. In focusing on that rat Gavin Elster, maybe you and I have been chasing the wrong villain. For all we know, Alfred Hitchcock went to his grave, laughing about what he'd gotten away with. But what is Alfred Hitchcock trying to get away with? And what clues can you and I use to catch him in the act? Vertigo should come with a warning, because by now Vertigo isn't just a movie anymore. It's kind of an organism. People treat Vertigo differently. It's like the Mona Lisa. She's a painting in the world of art, but because of how people treat her, she's also kind of a major player in our world. Vertigo is a player too. While Vertigo's playing on your screen, it's simultaneously on the other side of the screen, your side, and it's playing with you. Take this scene, for example. When Scotty takes Judy shopping, I never really put it together before now that Scotty asks the clerk if the shoes come in brown, but Judy is clearly modeling the shoes in brown. It's so obvious now. Am I supposed to believe nobody on the set noticed this? Or is it possible Alfred Hitchcock is up to something? I mean, before I started this project, I was only aware of one Carlotta portrait, but there have always been two. Now that I know that Vertigo is taunting me. Vertigo is playing a game, and the game is about to undermine the Vertigo you and I think we know in a very fundamental way. You and I have been led to believe that Scotty suffers from an incapacitating fear of heights, right? See if you agree that this acrophobia and the sensation of vertigo it creates in Scotty is part of the game. During Scotty's and Madeline's trip to the bell tower, Scotty's vertigo first kicks in at a height of roughly 32 steps. You and I accept that because Alfred Hitchcock makes a point of showing us, and it sets a precedent. But earlier in the story, when Scotty visits the McKittrick Hotel, Alfred Hitchcock showed Scotty climbing even higher. 37 steps. From this height, Scotty looks down, but this time he does not suffer a dizzy spell. Later on in the story, while waiting for Judy to return from the beauty parlor, Scotty is again able to look down from a height of at least 32 steps without experiencing vertigo. What's going on here is that the film is declaring that though its title might be Vertigo, You and I are being fooled and intentionally manipulated by its director. The same way Judy writes a letter confessing that she performed an illusion for Scotty to play a trick on him, Alfred Hitchcock confesses that he's been playing a trick on us. The question is, why? This project is going to be all about answering that question. There are even deeper secrets waiting to be revealed in Vertigo. Maybe you and I should indulge in some icebox talk ourselves. And maybe we ought to think about Vertigo in ways we've never tried before. So I'm going to go watch Vertigo 1,000,000 times, and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. It was only a moment for you. You took no notice. Anyway, I took my own advice after rewatching the hell out of Vertigo, and I've now thought about Vertigo in ways I've never tried before. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hit you out of the blue with a gigantic plot twist. In a story about doppelgangers, it would be a stroke of genius if the film itself is secretly a double film. And I'm not talking about the first half of the film versus the second half. I'm saying the film in its entirety actually hides another film from you and me in plain sight. I take back what I said a minute ago about Alfred Hitchcock swindling us. That was a false alarm. Alfred Hitchcock is actually giving you and me 2 movies for the price of 1. Here's what I mean. The one, the only Vertigo is actually 2 Vertigos. There's the story you and I know in the foreground, but believe it or not, there's a secret story in the background hiding for all these years. That's what I'm about to focus on. Pretend you're the jury, and I'm about to present you with evidence. I know it's outlandish to claim there are 2 Vertigos, but would you like to continue with me? I'm about to build my case for you. I'm going to talk about that weird left turn, why specifically left, and why it's important. I'm going to be talking about why that sailor appears twice in that scene, specifically twice, and he's walking to the left. Again, specifically to the left. There's a symbolic relationship between water and wood that I want to show you. I'm going to put Alfred Hitchcock's cameo under the magnifying glass. I'm going to examine the many mirrors in the film with you. We're going to go through the looking glass if you'll come with me. We're even going to dive into the significance of light fixtures of all things. And hang on a second, why is this broomstick blue at the beginning of this scene and red at the end of it? We're going to talk about that, all that, and so much more. And who knows, if you're like me and you have a nagging feeling that there's more going on in Vertigo than what's going on in Vertigo, then maybe just like how Carlotta's necklace snaps Scotty out of it, the key to unraveling Vertigo has been right under our nose the entire time.